On the 11th of September 2014, 3-year-old William Tyrrell, along with his sister and foster parents, travelled from Sydney up to the small town of Kendall near Port Macquarie on the New South Wales mid-north coast to visit and stay with his foster grandmother. The grandmother's house is located on a quiet street called Benaroon Drive that's surrounded by bushland and backs right up into the Kendall State Forest. The house itself is on an open, fenceless property with plenty of space for kids to run around and play. It was on the 12th of September between 10 and 10:30 a.m. where William and his sister were doing exactly that. Kids being kids and full of energy, they were running around outside in the front yard playing hide and seek, while William's foster mum and foster grandmother kept an eye on them. The mum then decided to go inside and make some cups of tea, where she could still hear William somewhere near the side of the house, roaring like a tiger. This would sadly become her last memory of him, because it was at this moment where things took a turn for the worst. As William's mother and grandmother sat down with their cups of tea, they soon noticed how suddenly quiet it had become. The sounds of William playing could no longer be heard, which was highly unusual for a young boy known for his loud, boisterous nature. William couldn't be heard or seen anywhere. As they searched around the house and out onto the street, calling out his name and getting no response, the mood quickly shifted from concern and worry to downright panic and fear, as the more time went on without hearing or seeing any sign of William. It got to the point where the police had to be called, and William was officially reported as missing. A massive search began involving hundreds of police, state emergency service workers, and community volunteers. When someone goes missing, especially when it's a child, the first few hours are crucial, and since it was reported that William suffered from asthma, it just made the goal of finding him ever more urgent. People on motorbikes and horseback, the police dog squad, and even helicopters were used in the search as everyone scoured the surrounding bushland looking for William. It was initially thought that William may have just run off into the Kendall State Forest across the road from the house, which covers a wide area but has quite rugged terrain that would make it extremely difficult for a 3-year-old boy to navigate. So there was hope that he couldn't have gone very far. And since William was wearing a very distinctive red Spider-Man suit at the time, he would be easily spotted amongst all the greenery. But after 5 days of searching without finding any trace of William or any clues as to where he might have gone, the prospect of him still being alive, if he was out in the bush somewhere, was looking less and less likely. Police started to look at the possibility that something more sinister may have happened to William. What seemed at first like a case of a young curious boy who simply just wandered off exploring and got lost started to look more and more like foul play had occurred. Mainly, the theory that William had been abducted. The police commander of the Mid-North Coast region, Superintendent Paul Fionn, said police were examining many scenarios. Quote, "We're not speculating in relation to any scenario, and again, we're not ruling out any possibilities, and investigators are exploring every possible avenue of inquiry." When asked if the case was being treated by investigators as an abduction, Superintendent Fionn said police were still looking into every option. The New South Wales Sex Crimes and Homicide Squad was eventually called in to assist, with Detective Inspector Gary Jubelin tasked in February 2015 to lead the investigation. The first person of interest the police investigated was local pawn shop owner and white goods repairman Bill Spedding, who had given a washing machine repair quote at the grandmother's house 4 days before William vanished. An anonymous phone call led police to Mr. Spedding's property in Bonny Hills, a town 20 kilometres from Kendall. Forensic teams combed the area extensively, even calling in an excavator and draining the septic tank that was on the property. Police also got a warrant to search the pawn shop, where they seized some computer equipment. Mr. Spedding was publicly named as a person of interest when police searched his van and found a Spider-Man toy. Since William was last seen dressed in a Spider-Man suit at the time he went missing, police must have thought that was enough evidence to make Mr. Spedding a person of interest, despite the claims made by all 3 of his grandchildren that the toy had been a gift purchased at a second-hand shop. Mr. Spedding told police that on the morning William disappeared, he had been having a coffee with his wife at a local cafe, and then went to a primary school assembly to watch one of his grandchildren receive an award. At the coronial inquest last year into William's disappearance, this alibi was confirmed to be true. However, in the meantime, police questioned and interrogated Mr. Spedding for 6 hours straight, before deciding to charge him over allegations of child abuse from 30 years ago, despite the claims having been discredited and dismissed by authorities back when they were originally made. The charges were eventually dropped in court. In a TV interview on ABC's Four Corners last year, Mr. Spedding said he was wrongly targeted and mistreated by the police, and that his life had been ruined as a result. He and his wife had had to move house several times ever since he was named as a person of interest, where he said, quote, "Describing the feeling is very difficult, but it's sad. We just don't know when someone's going to pop out of the woodwork and grab me around the throat again and say, 'You're Bill Spedding. What did you do with William?'" Mr. Spedding sued the New South Wales Police for compensation for reputational damage, abusive process, and malicious prosecution. Mr. Spedding and his lawyer believe the police focus on him came at the expense of other, more promising leads. To mark the 1-year anniversary since William's disappearance, thousands of people took part in community walks around the country to support the search for William. Nearly 80 Walk for William events were held nationwide, and at least one was held overseas in Canada. A criminal profiler revealed details about the type of person police suspect may have abducted William. If no one but the child's parents and grandmother knew about the visit, then the kidnapper would have had another reason to be there, either visiting, living, or working in the area. There was also only a narrow window of opportunity to take the child from outside the property, which is in a dead-end street. It does seem that this was an opportunistic crime, and when somebody makes that kind of impulsive decision, mistakes are made, and it's those kinds of mistakes that the investigation is focusing on. William's foster mum said that she did not believe that the person who kidnapped William was a local. Quote, "I don't think it is somebody from the community. I think it is someone who doesn't have a history there. I can't see a true local who knows my mum, who knows us and knows our family, choosing to take our child." It was later revealed to the public by police, 12 months after William's disappearance, that 2 unfamiliar cars had been seen parked across the road from the foster grandmother's house on the morning William went missing. A white station wagon and a grey sedan had been noticed by William's mother parked suspiciously close together and had not been seen again since William vanished. A grey sedan, possibly the same one that was parked with the station wagon, was seen driving past the house at around 9 AM while William and his sister were riding bikes in the driveway. The car was reported to have done a U-turn and driven back the other way out of the street. A 4-wheel drive was also seen heading out of Benaroon Drive at 10:30 AM, around the exact time William went missing. Police were able to track down the owner of one of the cars, the white station wagon, that was seen parked outside the Benaroon Drive house to a woman whose ex-husband, 59-year-old Anthony Jones, had been convicted and jailed for 3 years for the aggravated indecent assault of a young child not long after William went missing. Jones had told the police that he was out collecting scrap metal with his adult son on the day William vanished. However, at the coronial inquest last year, Jones's ex-wife and son told the inquest that he actually wasn't with his son collecting scrap metal on that morning of September 12, 2014. She testified that Jones had left home earlier than usual that morning, telling her that he was going, quote, scrapping with the son. But the son came over at around 11 AM by himself, saying that he hadn't heard anything from his father about going scrapping and had no idea where he was. Jones, who was a known user of speed and a serious alcoholic, returned home drunk later that day in the afternoon at around 2 to 3 PM. Jones claimed that he wasn't driving his then-wife's white Camry station wagon that day. But, once again, both his now ex-wife and son told the inquest he was in fact out driving her car that day, and was even spotted by a witness on the morning of September 12th, sitting in the Camry in a secluded park with the windows fogged up. But, since the car had been forensically examined from top to bottom, with no DNA traces of William being found, along with William's foster mum not being 100% sure of her recollections of seeing a white Camry parked outside the house that day, police didn't have any real concrete evidence to investigate Jones further. A key detail about Anthony Jones that sparked further interest by the police was the fact that he was a member of the group Grandparents as Parents Again, or GAPA, where its former president, Paul Bickford, had been given a 16-month suspended jail sentence after pleading guilty to indecently assaulting a child. Both men were good friends. This led police to investigate the possibility of a pedophile ring operating in the area, where it was reported that approximately 20 registered sex offenders were living within the region around Kendall. This led to another person of interest, convicted pedophile Frank Abbott, who lived only 10 kilometres from Benaroon Drive. Mr. Abbott became a suspect when a dying man in aged care made a deathbed confession to a nurse about how he picked up and gave a lift for his best mate Frank and William Tyrrell, along with other eyewitness statements claiming that Mr. Abbott made strange comments about William's disappearance in the days following. According to the nurse who heard the confession, the dying friend had confessed that he picked up his friend Frank Abbott and William Tyrrell at a shed behind the local primary school and drove them 300 kilometres north. Hospital records established that the friend was actually at Port Macquarie Hospital receiving treatment from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on the day William went missing. But police also uncovered highway CCTV footage that showed the man's car, a white station wagon, being driven up and down the Pacific Highway between Kew, the town right next to Kendall, and Port Macquarie during the 2 days after the disappearance. At the inquest, an eyewitness who was a worker at a takeaway shop where Mr. Abbott used to do repairs told the court that Abbott commented that police were looking in the wrong spot for William Tyrrell. The same witness also testified that Mr. Abbott once spoke of smelling something dead in bushland by a road. When this witness suggested that the smell was probably from a dead kangaroo, Mr. Abbott had said, quote, "No, I know the difference between a dead kangaroo and a dead human smell." Another eyewitness from the nearby town of Herons Creek came forward, saying she was 100% certain she heard a child scream on September 12, 2014, when she was outside tending to her garden. It wasn't until a few years later when a friend told her that a convicted pedophile by the name of Frank Abbott lived just across the paddock, in the direction where she had heard that scream from. Frank Abbott at the time was living in a caravan, which he was renting out from a man named Jeff Owens. Mr. Owens became a person of interest not only because of his association with Frank Abbott, but the fact that he had helped fix the decking at the Benaroon Drive house in the days just before William vanished, so he would have had a pretty good idea of the house's layout and its surrounding property. Mr. Owens testified at the coronial inquest that Frank had also told him about a bad smell within an area of bushland north of Kendall, to which he, Frank, said he could, quote, "smell death." Police searched and dug up surrounding bushland near Frank's caravan home for 4 days, but unfortunately turned up nothing that suggested William had been at the property or any clues that could point to his current whereabouts. Mr. Owens also said that he could not remember whether he and Frank spoke on the phone around the time William vanished. Quote, "I don't know. You see, I've contracted Parkinson's disease, and my memory has been shot to pieces." Frank Abbott was previously accused and acquitted at trial in 1968 for the murder of a teenage girl. He is currently serving time in prison for abusing 3 young children and has no real alibi for his whereabouts on September 12, 2014. Sometime in 2017, a man named Paul Savage became a new person of interest. Paul Savage lived very close by to the home on Benaroon Drive. The police put him under surveillance and placed a child's Spider-Man outfit in an area of bushland where Mr. Savage would very frequently go for walks in order to observe and gauge his reaction. When he was asked about the Spider-Man suit after he was brought in for questioning, he maintained never having seen it on that particular day the police were referring to, even though surveillance footage from the day in question showed he did pause several meters away from the suit for approximately 12 seconds. Mr. Savage said he saw the Spidey suit the following day and told police. When Detective Inspector Gary Jubilant insisted that Mr. Savage had seen the outfit that day, Mr. Savage asked why would he have waited a day later to tell police. "Because you're involved in the abduction of William Tyrrell." Rubbish. You've seen a Spider-Man suit the same as William Tyrrell's, and it confused you. You look at it, and it confuses you, and you think, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? It was alleged that Mr. Savage was covering up the accidental death of William when either him or his late wife, who died 7 months after William went missing, had run William over with their car. Mr. Savage was unaccounted for 2 hours that day, on September 12th, which detectives alleged could have given him plenty of time to hide the body. Mr. Savage claimed he had been out on his own searching through bushland for 30 minutes before going back home and making himself a cup of tea. When police installed listening devices around Mr. Savage's home, he could be heard talking to either himself or his dead wife. In one recording, he was heard saying, quote, "You're just a little boy. You're nobody," and referred to a suburb in Sydney that was very close to where William and his foster family lived. In another recording, he was heard saying, quote, "Don't tell anyone, love. They're right after me. Sorry." In one of the last recordings, Detective Jubilan confronted Mr. Savage and repeatedly suggested he had mental health issues which clouded his version of events. Quote, "This is not the way I usually talk to people in investigations, but I just can't help thinking in a tragic set of circumstances, it can be resolved. Sometimes with mental health, if the truth's distorted in your own mind, that's where it becomes problematic." These recordings would go on to create significant controversy within the task force assigned to find William, with Detective Jubilan being found guilty and fined $10,000 by a magistrate for breaching the Surveillance Devices Act by recording 4 conversations with Paul Savage on a mobile phone. While warrants allowed Mr. Savage's home, car and phone to be bugged, Jubilan's 2017 and 2018 recordings weren't made on approved listening devices, which produced poor quality audio and suffered basic failures such as flat batteries. Detective Jubilan's defense lawyer argued he was going through difficult personal circumstances at the time, which may be some explanation, not an excuse, as to why he cut corners in the eyes of some. But the Crown prosecutor said citizens were entitled to not have conversations recorded by representatives of the state, and other officers needed to be shown the conduct would not be tolerated. It is very serious offending, and it's offending that infringes fundamental civil rights. This all resulted in Gary Jubilan, one of the most experienced and highly reputable detectives of New South Wales, resigning from the police force after 30 years of service. At the coronial inquest last year, the now former homicide detective Gary Jubilan was not allowed to give evidence. The application for him to appear before the coroner's court was made by the lawyer representing William's foster parents. It may be the case that Mr. Jubilan knows what matters or lines of inquiry are still outstanding, and if there was a handover, what did they include? And if there wasn't, why not? These are all questions Mr. Jubilan would be best placed to answer. But the counsel assisting strongly opposed the application and raised doubts about whether Mr. Jubilan could offer any new or compelling evidence to the inquest. The Deputy State Coroner also refused the application and said she was satisfied she had all the required evidence before her. William Tyrrell's foster mother and a former senior prosecutor were among character witnesses who spoke highly of Jubilan's integrity and passion. From William's foster mother, quote, "The integrity in him and the honesty we got from him, I trust him implicitly." The former prosecutor said, quote, "I would categorise Gary Jubilan as one of the best officers that I've come across in terms of his application, his professionalism, his attitude, his dedication, and his integrity. Jubilan has maintained his actions were backed by a lawful right and operational need." To this day, after 7 years and 3 months since William went missing, no trace of him has ever been found. More than 1,000 reports of suspected sightings of William have been made, and over 1,000 people connected to the case have been interviewed. The police task force that was set up to find him is still following up on any leads that could help bring them one step closer to finding out what happened to William and whether there is a chance he could still be alive somewhere. The thing I find most frightening about this case is not just the number of sex offenders and pedophiles that were living in the area, but also how quickly William just vanished in such close proximity to his family, and nobody, Not even other people living on the street saw or heard anything. You would think that if a child was being abducted in broad daylight, it would be yelling for help, putting up a struggle, and the kidnapper would have been spotted running away with a screaming child in their arms. The fact that it was so silent and without a trace is what really gives me the chills. My heart goes out to William's family, and I sincerely hope that as long as this case remains open and ongoing, one day we will know the truth, and the person or people responsible for abducting William will be punished most severely. If anyone watching this video thinks they may know something or have information that may be helpful to police, please report it to the New South Wales Crime Stoppers number at 1800 333 000 or report online at newsouthwales.crimestoppers.com.au. I plan on doing some more videos like this that look at cases of missing people, unexplainable mysteries, and true crime that are all based in Australia. Thanks for watching this video. I'm your host, The Silly Ghost, signing out.